He gave her life and embraced death. What happened in the freezing storm that no one can explain? The storm did not arrive suddenly. It crept in, slow and deliberate, like something patient enough to wait until there was nowhere left to run. In October of 1917, the passenger ship Artemisia was 3 days into its Atlantic crossing, carrying hundreds of immigrants away from Europe and toward the promise of New York. Third-class passengers were packed deep within the ship, where the air smelled of damp clothes, salt, and fear, masked as hope. Among them was Luca Ferraro, a quiet man in his early 30s, traveling alone with his 6-year-old daughter, Elena. Elena had been sick for weeks before the journey. Luca told her stories every night to distract her from the coughing fits and the endless darkness below deck. Stories about America, about bright streets, warm bakeries, and a small house where she would never be cold again. She always asked the same question before falling asleep. "Papa, will Mama be there?" And every night, Luca hesitated just a second too long before answering. "No," he would say softly, "but I will be. Always." By midnight, the sea had turned violent. The ship groaned as waves slammed against its steel body. Plates rattled, lamps swayed. Somewhere far above, glass shattered. The calm lies of the crew dissolved into frantic shouts as water forced its way into the lower compartments. When the first scream echoed through third class, Luca woke instantly. Cold water was already seeping across the floor. "Elena," he whispered urgently, shaking her whisper. "Oh, we have to go. Now!" She clutched his coat as the water rose past their ankles, then their knees. People surged toward the stairwells, panic turning neighbors into obstacles. Someone fell. Someone else screamed for a child that had vanished into the dark. By the time Luca reached the stairs, the water was at his waist and rising fast. The ship tilted. Elena cried out as Luca lifted her high above the water, his arms burning as bodies crashed into him from every direction. The air was thick with steam and terror. He could already hear it, the sound no one ever forgets. Metal screaming as it begins to die. They never reached the lifeboats. A massive wave struck the ship, throwing Luca against the wall. His grip slipped for half a second, and Elena screamed his name. He recovered, pulling her close, but he knew then what his heart had already been telling him. They were out of time. The corridor ahead collapsed inward as water burst through the walls like an opened wound. People were sucked screaming into the black. Luca backed away, searching desperately for anything that might give his daughter a chance. That was when he saw it, a shattered porthole. The glass was gone, torn away by the storm. Icy seawater rushed in through the circular opening, and beyond, it was nothing but darkness and crashing waves. Too small for an adult, just big enough for a child. Elena looked at it, then back at him, confusion written across her tear-streaked face. "Papa, it's cold." Luca knelt, holding her face between his hands, forcing himself to smile while his chest felt like it was tearing open. "Elena," he said, voice trembling, "listen to me. You have to swim. You have to swim toward the lights." "What lights?" she asked, her lips blue. "The ones waiting for you." She shook her head violently. "No. I want to stay with you." Luca pulled her into his chest, breathing in the scent of her hair, knowing it would be the last thing he ever remembered. Then, before his courage could fail him, he turned and pushed her through the porthole. Elena screamed as the freezing ocean swallowed her. "Swim!" Luca shouted into the roaring storm. "Swim to the light!" For one brief moment he saw her face above the waves. Then she was gone. The Artemisia sank 7 minutes later. Luca Ferraro vanished with it. His body was never recovered. Elena survived. She was pulled from the water nearly an hour later by a rescue vessel that should never have been close enough to find her. Hypothermic, barely conscious. She kept whispering the same words over and over. Papa said, "Swim to the light." She was placed in an orphanage in New York, where nightmares followed her into adulthood. She dreamed of water filling her lungs, of metal groaning beneath her feet, and of her father, always standing just out of reach, his face distorted by darkness, pointing behind her, telling her to swim. Decades passed. Elena grew older, married, had children of her own, but the dreams never stopped. Sometimes, when she closed her eyes, she could still feel hands on her shoulders, guiding her forward, pushing her when she wanted to stop. On the night before her 78th birthday, Elena woke suddenly, heart pounding. Her bedroom was cold, too cold. Water dripped onto the floor beside her bed. She sat up slowly. There were wet footprints leading from her doorway to the foot of her bed, bare footprints. And standing in the shadowed corner of the room was a man soaked in black water, his clothes torn, his eyes hollow but familiar. "Elena," he said softly. She should have screamed. Instead, tears streamed down her face. "Papa?" He stepped closer, water pooling around his feet, his voice heavy with the weight of the sea. "You've done well," he said, "but it's time." She shook her head. "No, I'm not ready." Behind him, the wall shimmered like water reflecting moonlight. He raised a hand and pointed. "Swim to the light." Elena felt something cold close around her heart. As she took her final breath, she realized the truth. Her father had never left her. He had been guiding her entire life, and now, at last, he had come to walk her the rest of the way. The light beyond the water waited, and this time, she followed him. Some sacrifices don't end with death. Some promises are kept forever.